aka late adulthood, or for some, it's late life development. Dr. Buenaventura obtained his BS Clinical Psychology degree from the Far Eastern University in Manila with great distinction, or in Latin honors, that's magna cum laude. He then pursued his Doctor of Medicine degree from UERM, where he also trained in general psychiatry. He had postgraduate training in psychiatry of old age from the New South Wales Institute of Psychiatry in Sydney, Australia, making him one of the pioneers, if not the pioneer, psychogeriatrician. I hope I got that right, of the country. He is a diplomat of the Philippine Board of Psychiatry, a life fellow of the Philippine Psychiatric Association, and a member of the International Psychogeriatric Association. And in the not so recent past, from 2023 to 2024, he was the president of the Philippine Psychiatric Association and the chairman of the Specialty Board of Philippine Psychiatry. He is an associate professor of human lifespan and psychiatry in La Consolacion University in Bulacan, in their College of Medicine. And here in UERM, he is a consultant psychiatrist and a visiting lecturer in the College of Medicine. It is always a pleasure to introduce my classmate, Dr. Robert Buenaventura. Thank you, Bong.
Thank you very much, classmate Tina. Dr. Cruz is our class president, so whenever she asks me to do a lecture for HLC, of course, I will always say yes. So good afternoon, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to see Dr. Serena, because she's the only one, as Dr. Cruz has mentioned, who opened their camera. I was going to say hi to another student. I met her mother recently. Her mother is a physician, and we're doing a project. And the mother is very proud of her daughter, who's a first-year student here at UERM College of Med. I'm not going to say hi, but just wanted to let her know, well, if she's listening, that I'm involved in a project with her mom. And this is a project that we're doing for the Philippine College of Physicians. Okay. So let me share my slides. And I know that you already have a copy of this presentation because this was already submitted previously to Dr. Cruz for, I think, uploading to Canva. Okay. So as Dr. Cruz has mentioned, I'm going to talk about old age and late adulthood, which is it's a favorite topic of mine. Just recently, I had 3 new invitations to lecture about various topics on old age. So one will be for the Philippine Society of Geriatrics and Gerontology. Another one is for the Philippine College of Geriatric Medicine. And another one is for the Department of Psychiatry at UERM. So I hope that in the future, a few of you would be interested in exploring a career in geriatrics, whether in psychogeriatrics or geriatric psychiatry or in geriatric medicine, because as I will mention later on, this is a rapidly growing field. Okay. So my objectives for the lectures are as follows: to talk to you, to discuss the following burning issues in old age, psychosocial developmental tasks, major challenges, and main achievements. At the moment, we are going through what is referred to as a gray revolution. The gray revolution is primarily resulting from an increasing proportion of the elderly. I'll explain a little bit more later on what I mean about the increased proportion of the elderly. But suffice it to say at this point that there are 2 main reasons for this. Number 1 is a longer lifespan, and number 2, decreased birth rates, both of which we are seeing as well in the Philippines, not just globally, but really in the Philippines as well. There's a misconception that the birth rates in the Philippines are increasing, but actually since the 60s, since the 1960s, the birth rates in the country have been gradually decreasing. So this gray revolution is also referred to as a demographic revolution. So at present, approximately 10% of the 60-year-old group of the population comprise about 10% as a proportion. And we're going to see an increase to 20% by the year 2050 and to 33% in the year 2150. There's a very rapid increase in the very old. So we talk about old age. So essentially, these are individuals who are 60 years old and above. So in clinical practice, we divide them into three groups. We have the young olds between 60 to 70 years old, the middle olds between 70 to 80 years old, and the very old or the old population who are 80 years old and above. At present, they comprise about 11% of the total population. And by 2150, they will comprise 33% of the elderly population. Historically, this has been very consistent that the majority of the elderly are women. So it seems that the proportion of 55% of all those who are 60 years old has remained constant in the last 2 to 3 decades. Okay, but of course, the proportion of women becomes higher as we go into an older population group. Although if we look at it in terms of proportion, among the well-developed or very rich countries, such as Scandinavian countries, Japan, and Singapore, the proportion of the elderly is higher compared to the less developed countries. But if you look at in terms of absolute numbers or the actual numbers of elderly individuals, there are still more elderly individuals in developing countries, such as the Philippines. Okay. So how do I want to reinforce that? So I'm going to mention briefly some information that were called from the latest national census. This was done on May 1st, 2020. So if you could just imagine, this was census that was done in the midst of the pandemic. Well, the pandemic had just started by then. If you recall, middle of March was when the lockdown started. So doing a census door to door in May 2020 was somewhat risky thing. Okay. Okay, so what do we see? At present, based on the 2020 census, the total population in the Philippines is almost 110 million. This grew by about 1.72% from the previous census. So as you will see, from 2000 up to 2020, every 5 years there is a significant increase in the population. But our point of interest at the moment would be the elderly individual. So if you look in the 2020 census, in the red box, the individuals who comprised 60 years and over, they totaled more than 9 million individuals, and they comprised 8.5% of the total population, as opposed to 2015. In 2015, the 60 and over population was 7.5 million, roughly about 7.5%, because the total population at the time was only 100 million. Okay. So the proportion of the elderly rose from 7.5% in 2015 to 8.5% in 2020. This was what I was mentioning earlier when I said that going into psychogeriatrics or geriatric medicine would be a good idea as far as a specialty of or a medical subspecialty is concerned, because there is an increasing number of elderly individuals, and therefore there will be an increasing demand in the services, especially medical services for the elderly. I mentioned earlier about longevity or the lifespan. Right now, the world average is 71 years old. In the Philippines, we have a life expectancy of 69. And in our region, the highest would be in Hong Kong and Macau, both technically provinces of mainland China, in which the life expectancy is 85. Followed by Japan and South Korea, in which the life expectancies are 84 years old. The lowest life expectancy in our region is in Pakistan at 66, or that's not too bad, considering that in the Philippines, it's only 69. Usually, Philippines and Indonesia, right now, Indonesia has a life expectancy of 68. Usually, over the years, they parallel each other. Sometimes Indonesia is better, sometimes the Philippines is better, sometimes they're the same. If you want additional information about life expectancies, you can check the website of the World Bank. I actually extracted this data from their website a couple of weeks ago. So talking about life expectancy, I would like to, you probably know her already. You've probably seen her in YouTube Shorts or Facebook posts. This is Joanna Klaas. She's from Germany. She's a Guinness World Records holder as the world's oldest competitive gymnast. Not just the world's oldest gymnast, but the world's oldest competitive gymnast. She will be 99 years old in November. Okay, so the person so that means she's only 98, but she's still at the last time I checked a couple of weeks ago, she's still alive and kicking. Although I think she cut down already in terms of the number of exhibitions and competitions that she has engaged in. Which we want more information about her, you can check her out in Google. So how do we define aging? So there are various ways by which we can define aging. Some in the Philippines, once you become forgetful, sometimes that could be assigned aging. So that's a psychological definition. Biological definition, if you start to have wrinkles or white hair. Physiological definition, you develop a lot of illnesses such as diabetes, hypertension, osteoarthritis, always feeling fatigued or tired. A social definition, once you retire from work, or having grandchildren. That's already because once you have a grandchild, you'll be called lolo or lola, diba? So that may be a social definition of aging. And then finally, I think the Philippines is the only country in the world that has a legal definition of what constitutes an elderly individual. So based on Republic Act 7432, and this has been further amended, the Senior Citizens Act, this classifies a person as a senior citizen based on age, which is 60 years old and above. Okay, so why do we grow old? So what are the theories of aging? Many theories have been proposed to explain the process of aging, but none of them appear to be fully satisfactory. Modern biological theories of aging in humans fall into two main categories. We have program theories and then damage or error theories. The program theories imply that aging follows a biological timetable. So there's a sequence of events that goes on. Perhaps there's a continuation of the one that regulates childhood growth and development. So from the time that we're born to the time that we die, there's this sequence of growth and development that is responsible for the aging process. This regulation would depend on changes in gene expression that affect systems responsible for maintenance, repair, and defense responses of the body. For example, in programmed longevity theory, this is also called Hayflick theory. Cellular division is limited by the length of the telomere. As you know, telomere is the region of the nucleotide sequences at the end of each chromosome. As each cell divides, the telomere gets shorter and shorter with each cell division until at a certain point it cannot divide anymore. So that will lead to cellular deterioration. The second group of theories in damage or error theories. So all of these theories are self-explanatory, like when you hear wear and tear, we know what that means, okay? So so just point out, for example, in free radicals, because this seems to be one of the most widely held theories right now. So in free radicals theory, free radicals are necessary, as you know, for certain chemical processes in the body, such as regulation of blood pressure. But if the amount becomes excessive, it can lead to cell damage and eventually cell death. So an example here is superoxide, which can be catalyzed by antioxidant superoxide dismutase, which results to an oxygen molecule and hydrogen peroxide. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that free radicals are still necessary in our bodies for certain processes, but unfortunately, they can lead to cellular death or deterioration. So aging is a biopsychosocial process, and these are the main burning issues which I'll discuss a little bit more in detail subsequently. So if you look at the table, you have biological, psychological, and social. Social will include also spiritual aspects. Now, so as you know, with biological, there will be age-related changes of the body and organ system. Okay, down the line, psychological will include psychological changing roles and relationships, family, friends, society, occupation, issues and fears of dependency, etc. And then social, of course, this will involve social concepts like ageism and emptiness syndrome. Again, I'll discuss these items in a little bit more detail. So old age is a period of physical changes that occur despite measures by the individual to stop them. So no matter how much we dye our hair black as they grow gray, it will still eventually grow gray and will still remain to be old. No matter how many Botox procedures we go through, or we will still be that age. Okay. Now, these changes do not necessarily occur altogether. They may happen simultaneously or successively. In fact, some biological changes of aging do not happen to all individuals. For example, a decrease in audition or vision, or visual or auditory acuity. We generally assume that as we grow older, this will deteriorate. But I've met a lot of elderly individuals in their 80s, 90s, and also some who are 100 years old, whose vision and hearing are still very good. Okay, so they may happen all together, they may not happen all together, they may happen successively or simultaneously, but then again, they might not all of them may happen. Okay, in fact, I have elderly patients who have better blood pressures than I do. Okay, so and they're not even taking any antihypertensive medication. So there are, of course, multiple factors that will determine this. But what I'd like to emphasize is that because the concept here is that as we grow older, aging is deterioration, not necessarily. Okay, it does happen, but not in all cases. Okay, and not in all aspects. These changes are relevant to the psychological development because they can affect body image, mobility, and other functional capacities. In fact, these changes seem to be more detrimental to the middle-aged individuals rather than to the elderly. It is the middle-aged individuals, those who are in their late 40s, 50s, as they approach 60, who are more anxious about the state of aging rather than those who are actually elderly or senior citizens already. Psychological changes also occur. Most of the changes that occur in old age first become apparent in midlife and accelerate very slowly. So if if you notice that you're becoming forgetful as you grow older, then this would actually become more apparent while we're still young, while we're still in middle age. Actual performance tends to be maintained. So how well we do, for example, that's why you will note that a lot of doctors can still actively practice even though they're already in their 80s or in their 90s. The renowned pediatrician Dr. Fidel Mundo was already in her 90s, and she was still doing rounds in the hospital that she built. Okay, so that means it's only there will only be restrictions, but if we are able to do these things, then we can. Okay, that's why medicine is actually a good career to go into, because there's although technically you may retire. For example, faculty members at the UERM College of Medicine do retire at the age of 65. But if you're a clinician, you can still continue to practice your specialty even though you're 80 and 90, as long as you're capable. In fact, there's a computer study that was done in Germany a while back by Ramskar et al. They showed that older brains slow down because of greater experience levels, not necessarily because of mental decline. Okay, so it's not because the brain is deteriorating, but simply because there's so much information to sift through. It's like if you can just imagine a huge library compared to a small table. So like if you put a copy of the El Filibusterismo on the top of this table, and then like you ask someone, one will look for the copy of the book on the table. The other will look for a copy of El Filibusterismo in the library. The one who's going into the library is going to take a longer time before he finds the book, simply because there's so many items that he has to go through. While one who's going to just pick it up from the table will be able to do it quickly and easily. Okay, so that's what we want to emphasize, that it's just because, for example, we're starting to become forgetful, does not necessarily mean that there's something bad going on in our brains. It could simply because we're trying to sift through a lot of information to be able to get what we want. Okay. Generally, though, it seems there is less flexibility of response, less ability to problem solve, less ability to learn new material, this decreasing speed of performance, but creativity and achievement continue on in old age. This uh, just want to emphasize that the word that's very important here would be seems. This will not happen all the time. This may happen to some individuals, but what and again, there may not be any change as far as psychological or cognitive functioning is concerned. But we do see a lot of changes as far as our social lives are concerned. Number one would be losses. As an age group, old age goes through a lot of losses. No, losses of all kinds are suffered in a scale which other age periods do not experience. No, it is, however, up to the individual to know or learn how to cope with these losses. Some of these losses include loss of status, income, health, by company we mean affiliation with other people, independence, accommodation, and of course the threat of the loss of life. Number two, in terms of needs, the basic needs of the elderly are much the same as those of other age groups. Hindi magbabago yan eh. No? How they are met can determine how the elderly will cope. So these needs are divided into two groups. The first one would be physical needs, which include nutrition, warmth and comfort, shelter and clothing, and then psychological needs, respect, security, company or affiliation, self-determination or independence. So these are the same as what we would, the same needs as what we would see in other age groups. So social concepts include ageism. I'll discuss this a little bit more later on. Social disengagement means as we grow older, we tend to disengage or detach ourselves from society. So a lot of people, like when they retire, I have a very good friend, an emergency room physician in the U.S. And when he retired from work there, he and when he retired from work, he decided to come back to the Philippines, and he had a house built by the beach in Batangas, and that's where he stays most of the time now. So that was what he wanted to do, even while he was working. Okay, and then his family just visits him there, especially his grandkids. Activity theory, this is sort of the opposite of social disengagement. Activity theory means they still become more active. They continue to become more active. In fact, some are more active when they grow older. Okay, social emotional selectivity, that means they tend to, and this is based on experience. No, they will choose how they will choose the situations to which they react. So if they feel it's not worth reacting to, then they won't get angry and they'll just ignore it. Okay, unlike when they were younger, they'll probably become hyper. But now, as they grow older and have learned from experience, they'll probably not react at all. Role-less role. That means they have some like title, like head of the family, but no actual role, no actual responsibility. So, and this happens in a lot of families now, especially those who are engaged in the family business. So the patriarch, the father, the eldest member of the family might still be referred to as the chairman of the business, but actually his younger sons might or younger daughters might be actually the ones running the family. So he's still referred to as the chairman, but no actual responsibility on a day-to-day basis. Continuity theory, as I've mentioned, what we would see in doctors, what we are doing now would still just continue as we grow older. Then finally, emptiness syndrome, together with ageism, I'll speak about this a little bit more later on. So ano yung mga developmental tasks na as we grow older, no? So adjusting to decreasing physical strength and health. Unfortunately, one of the truisms is that we can become frail as we grow older and health can deteriorate. So we need to prepare for that. We need to adjust to retirement and reduced income. Um, I know a lot of elderly physicians who are still active in clinical practice, but of course, the volume of work that they're doing is not as much as the volume of work that they were doing when they were younger. So that's why they need to be able to adjust to that, and that's why we need to prepare for that as well. Okay, that's why we a good idea would be to invest in a home. Okay, so that you will always have a roof over your head. Adjusting to the death of a spouse, establishing an explicit affiliation with one's age group. Unfortunately, this becomes more challenging as one grows older. In fact, one of the difficulties of those who have reached 100 years old is that most of there are hardly anyone who's at the same age as they are. Okay, so even their family members have passed away. I remember being involved in a project in a household that had four seniors. Okay, there was a 160-year-old, 75, 80, and then one centenarian. Okay, so that was a project that I did together with another physician. Okay, which was very interesting because you rarely find such a household in which you have several generations of senior citizens in living in the same. Then meeting social and civic obligations, and then the last one, actually, this is something that we need to do when we're still younger. Establishing satisfactory physical living arrangements. We do this one while we're younger. Like I mentioned earlier, invest in a house. Okay, so don't think of buying a house once you retire. That it's actually better to think about this once we're still much younger, because that will be the time that we will be able to still be able to do that. You're all familiar with Eric Erikson, whose psychosocial theory of the eight ages of man is widely followed and read by those who are involved in psychology and psychiatry. So you've gone through trust versus mistrust down the line, and in old age, the crisis that remains is between ego integrity versus despair. So the focus here is ego integrity. So that means the ego or the self is whole. Remember, the essence of the word integrity means that implies a sense of wholeness, like your integers, which are whole numbers. So essentially, that's it. That we're whole, we're happy, and sometimes not even happy, but more of content. Okay, rather than in despair or depressed. Okay, so but it will all of this will depend on how we have gone through the various stages in our life. But remember, even if, for example, in the previous stage, you can still be in stagnation, but as you reach old age, you may actually change your life, and then develop a better sense of equanimity or acceptance of what's happening to you, and achieve ego integrity, okay, rather than wallow in despair. As Erickson was growing old, because as for your information, when Erickson and his wife Joan, so Erickson was not the only one who came up with his theories. He did this actually in conjunction with his wife Joan, who's a psychologist herself. Okay, so when they did the 88 ages of man, they were actually still in their middle age. So that's why when they proposed the theory about ego integrity versus despair, they had not reached old age yet. So that's why when they reached their 60s, 70s, and 80s, they started talking and discussing, and then they wanted to revisit, okay, yung eighth stage na yon. So that's why they added a ninth stage, yung what is called gerotranscendence. So just to define this a little bit better, so when we say transcend, it's a verb that means to go beyond the range or limits or surpass whatever we're doing now. So transcendence as a noun means an existence or experience beyond the normal or physical level. So that means even though you may be physically infirm or frail in old age, you may still be psychologically be exemplary. Okay. So that means you try to live beyond and go beyond the limits or the restrictions that are being brought about by old age. The theory also of Eric and Joan is that we will experience the previous 8 stages, in one go at this time, but because, for example, there may be issues between trust and mistrust, okay, so which may reappear as we grow older, and then therefore it's still up to us to be able to process that. Remember, in terms of age groups, yung old age is the most diverse and the widest. For example, yung infancy, hanggang ilang taon lang yun, di ba? Like yung first 3 years of life, no? Childhood is what? Just about what? 7, 10 years. Teenage, ilang taon lang yan, di ba? Wala, 7 years lang yan. Adulthood is between 20 to 40. Middle age is between 40 to 50. 40 to 60, but old age is 60 to ano na yan, unlimited na yan, ano, hanggang sa, even though you may reach 100 years old. So that means you're looking at even 4 decades of life. And that's the reason why I mentioned earlier, that's the reason why we divided it into three subgroups, no? Yung young old, middle old, and old. Simply because there's such a wide range as far as the ages are concerned. Okay, what are the major challenges as we grow older? Dealing with physiological decline, being able to accept losses, fighting ageism and faulty stereotypes, adapting to changing familial and social structure, the grandparent as parent syndrome. We're seeing this now, particularly in the Philippines. Actually, this is a syndrome that came about in the Philippines as a result of the OFW phenomenon. So a lot of young couples are going abroad to work, okay, to support their families, and they're leaving their children to be taken care of or looked after by their parents, so the children's grandparents. So, and it's actually a very huge challenge for elderly. A lot of elderly individuals do not want to look after their grandchildren. I mean, they pwede sila mag-babysit. That's fine. To a few hours, over the weekend, and then they're fine with that. But to look after their grandchildren for years while the children's parents are working abroad, that's not something that they would really aspire to do. So that's why it's a huge challenge for a lot of elder individuals to be able to do this, because physically they're already becoming frail. Tapos, and that's why you will see a lot of older adults who are still like selling stuff along on the streets, simply because they're also trying to support the families, especially the children that were left under their care. Emptiness syndrome, you're all familiar with this. This is the time when the children are all grown up and have careers and lives of their own. So they leave the family house and then they set up their own families. For a lot of aging parents, this may be a welcome situation, because this could give them renewed sense of marital relationship. With the children gone, it's just the two of them again. Okay, but for a lot of couples, it's also a huge challenge, because when the children are gone, they find out they have nothing in common anymore. Because the only thing that was holding them together basically were their kids. The concern about the kids, talking about the kids, the kids' achievements, the kids did this, then, so that when the kids are gone, they find that that's it. There's nothing else, and that's the reason why, in terms of marital therapy, it's always emphasized that the marital relationship should be paramount to the family relationship. Okay, because that should be the main foundation of the familial relationship, which is the marital relationship. So that's why for a lot of older adults, emptiness syndrome can be very challenging. But for others who may take a very positive view of this, this could be great for them. I know elderly couples whose children have left the family home, who've converted the children's rooms into, like for the woman, a craft place, or for the man, it could be like a man cave, or even a small gym for both of them. Okay. Then finally, another major challenge would be overcoming disengagement, neglect, and abuse. One of the biggest issues that older adults face is abuse. especially during the pandemic, this increased. So elder abuse, child abuse, spouse abuse, all forms of abuse increased during the pandemic, and that's why it is some. But and this is a complex topic by itself, so we're not going to discuss this at this point. But suffice to say that this is something that you would need to consider. Okay, a lot of individuals actually don't even realize that they're abusing the older adult in their family. Okay, for example, not giving them full nutrition, okay, or not buying their required maintenance medications, okay. So things like that, or thinking that siguro okay lang naman kay nanay na hindi mag-aircon, ano, so wag na lang natin lagyan ng aircon yung kwarto niya, no? Yung mga ganun dahil matanda na siya, no? So which is a wrong attitude to take. Okay. So I mentioned a couple of times about ageism. So ageism refers to basically all the misconceptions about aging. So this was coined in 1963 by Robert Butler. It refers to the pessimism regarding the treatment of even the healthier and even more vigorous older person. An example of ageism is the concept that as we as we grow older, we'll become forgetful, we'll become ulyanin or demented, which is wrong because only less than 10% of the population develop dementia. Although if we talk about uh, forgetfulness, that there's a little bit more, but again, forgetfulness is not a pathological situation. So faulty stereotypes rose mainly from these situations, mga folklore and social and fairy tales. Kasi sa fairy tales, di ba, ang kontrabida laging yung matandang bruha. Okay? Ang bida palaging yung batang magandang prinsesa. So that's why growing up, children who watch all these Disney films develop a mindset that older adults are scary, or older adults are out to kill them or harm them. Okay. So it also comes from mass media, jokes, errors in scientific studies. In fact, one of the persons that we could also blame is Freud, Sigmund Freud, because he wrote a long time ago, of course, that those 50 years old and above were not good candidates for psychoanalysis. He said old dogs cannot learn new tricks because of the extensive amount of material to be dealt with, long time required for therapy, inelasticity of the mental processes, and ineducability of the older patient. Of course, now we know that these are not true, but they tend to persist as a form of misconception. So these negative stereotypes about aging, of course, will lead the older adult to develop negative self-concept. In fact, a lot of older adults expect or anticipate that they're going to become demented once they reach 60. Okay. So they develop a lot of anxiety and fears. So though unfavorable social attitudes tend to be fairly universal, they appear to be stronger in more urban, more industrialized, and more egocentric societies. Pero yung sa mga, like in the Philippines, yung mga traditional societies natin, meron din yan. Okay. Especially those in relation to forgetfulness and being frail and dependent. So what are the main achievements that we can expect as we grow older? Favorable attitude towards old age develop as a result of earlier pleasurable contacts with elderly people. The best example here would be our grandparents. So if growing up, our grandparents were charming, pleasant, generous, and loving, then we will develop a very positive concept of older adults. But if growing up our grandparents were stingy, imagine Christmas, bibigyan lang kayo ng 5 pesos. Okay? They're cantankerous, irritable, then the opposite will happen. You'll develop a negative concept about older adults. So yun. So our relationship with our grandparents will be the best paradigm as far as how we're going to deal with older adults in our lives. Okay. And you have to realize this because, as I've mentioned, eventually once you become physicians, you will be dealing with older patients, elderly patients. I've seen a lot of doctors who are actually are okay with younger patients, pero once the patient becomes an elderly individual, their attitude changes into a negative state, And once we try to dig deeper, then it helps them when they realize that it's primarily because of certain traumatic situations in their in their earlier lives. Okay. Happy memories of childhood and adulthood, freedom to pursue a desired lifestyle with minimal outside interference, a realistic attitude toward and acceptance of the physical and psychological changes that aging inevitably brings. Ang ano dito, important word is realistic. Okay, not optimistic, no, not fantastic, but realistic. Okay, acceptance of the self and present living conditions, even if this fall below expectations. Kasi nga hindi nakapag-prepare mabuti. Halimbawa, no, an opportunity to establish a satisfying, socially acceptable pattern of life, continued participation in interesting and meaningful activities, acceptance by and respect from the social group, a feeling of satisfaction with present status and past achievements, satisfaction with marital status and sex life, even though there is none. No, I mean, a lot of people grow old and never get married. Okay, so that's it. It is what it is. No, reasonably good health. Again, reasonably good health without chronic health problems. Although wishful thinking yan. Magkakaroon pa rin tayo ng chronic health problems as long as we are able to manage them well. And that's one of advantage of being a physician. Okay, being a physician helps us understand these diseases much better and able to manage them better. Enjoyment of social activities with family and friends. A financial situation adequate to meet needs and wants. Adequate, ano? We don't have to go overboard. So successful aging. Old age can be and is an emotionally healthy and satisfying period of life. The concept of successful aging is the norm rather than the exception. Although aging brings about physical changes, this does not mean that aging is equivalent to disease. So, as I mentioned earlier, growing old is not a pathological state. Growing old is a phase of life. Okay. So old age is still a period of continuing intellectual, emotional, psychological, and social growth. There are three main components of successful aging: autonomy, support, and health. When we talk about autonomy, this refers to the ability of the individual to control aspects of his or her life, which includes being able to map out the direction that his or her life is going to take and being able to live with a minimum of dependence on others. So sustaining factors include emotional security, financial security, occupational involvement, and spiritual care, particularly in Asian East Asian countries, no, including the Philippines. Spiritual care is very important. This is actually a component that I include in my clinical practice as well. So with my elderly patients, no, I inquire whether they are religious or they have some degree of spirituality, because if they are, then I would encourage them to include this as part of their therapy, like pastoral care. Okay, support. So although we want the individual to be autonomous or independent, but we still need support. So this refers to the presence of social network of family and friends with whom the individual can interact and obtain support. This also implies the process of interdependence. So not just independence, but interdependence rather than dependence. Also means having outside sources of encouragement or assistance, having people to turn to in times of need, and having other individuals to satisfy the need of affiliation. So as you can see, yung affiliation is very critical. So finally, there's health. So mental and physical health are also important, as these delimit incapacities and enable the individual to actively pursue other goals in life. So mental and physical, no, hindi lang physical, no, isasama pa rin natin ang mental. Okay. So in ending this lecture, no, just like to give the following summaries. Everyone who will go through the average lifespan will grow old. So that means almost all of us who are in this Zoom meeting right now. Okay. At least kami ni Dr. Cruz, ano na kami, senior na kami. No, kaya we're already in the or completing our lifespan in the process now. It must be emphasized that old age is not a depressing nor a bleak period of life, no? And that's why that's what Erickson wanted to emphasize, no? Yung ego integrity, yung gero transcendence, no? This is, we can still go beyond. So even though we're infirm, even though we're frail, we can still go beyond those restrictions or limitations. In addition, there are some important conditions which contribute to good adjustment in old age, as we have mentioned earlier. And even though these conditions contribute to happiness in old age, it is not essential that they all be present. So we may not have a home. I kept mentioning that. But we can probably rent. No, well, as long as we have a roof over our heads. And yung institutionalization was mentioned very, very, very briefly, in passing, but that is something that we might want to consider as well. Kaya lang dito kasi sa Philippines, ang konsepto ng institutionalization is just yung mga home for the aged. Actually, if you look at it more closely, there are various degrees of institutionalization. There are retirement homes. There are what we call self-sustaining uh, self-sustaining places. No, but all of them technically are institutions, but they cater to older adults in various levels of capabilities. Okay, so that's something that we might need to consider. I I have a lot of several patients, elderly patients who live on their own. Usually, what they may just have a maid or a driver, or the maid or the driver maybe live out. It's just them at the end of the day. But as long as they're capable and happy with that situation, then that's fine. A lot of them are very proud of that. In fact, their families usually volunteer to look after them or have them stay over. But a lot of older adults will really prefer to live on their own. Then it must be emphasized that people have different needs and that an earlier pattern of life that brought a satisfying lifestyle may continue on in old age. So what you're going through, particularly as you reach middle age, and especially if you've become very successful as far as your career is concerned, you have a great family, you're married and with kids and things like that, then that will simply continue on in old age. But doesn't mean that that may apply to everyone, because some of us may be happy or content just by ourselves, as I've already mentioned earlier. Um, what is important here is to be able to map this out for ourselves, and to plan for it. So even now, when you're in your 20s, you think about this and you consider this as what you need to do as part of the human lifespan, okay, or the human life cycle. And with that, I'd like to end my lecture. So I turn it over back to Dr. Cruz. Hello again, Dr. Rafi. Dr. Rafi, hindi ka pa senior, di ba?
Oh,
Senior ka
yeah,
na ba?
yes. I am 63, Dr. Bo. Way past the 60 point. But I'd like to comment if it's okay. Your topic, I think, is very topical now because the subject of ageism, as you mentioned, is actually a big deal in the upcoming elections in the United States. Right?
Yeah,
We have two candidates who are in their 80s, and apparently they seem to be very capable pa, although one seems slower than the other, although he makes more sense when he talks. Well, the other one seems very vital and active, pero I don't know, word salad ang lumalabas. But yeah, I'd like to, as a senior, I'd just like to comment that, my memories, I perceive that lately my memories are so clear when it comes to things that happened back in med school, like 30, 40 years ago. And I have trouble remembering what I had for breakfast, for example.
Recent
I have to think, ano bang kinain ko? Baka kasi it's the same food all the time. But, things like this happen. And I used to pride myself on having a very keen memory. I could remember facts and names just so easily. And now I have to struggle. It's like my multiple synapses have shrunk and have attributed to just one synapse. The other day, my wife was asking, "Oh, do you remember what I wore on our honeymoon?" And I was thinking, I was going, "Gosh, I can't remember." I was saying, that's like asking me, what was the gift wrapping on my on my birthday present 15 years ago or 20 years ago? I honestly could not answer. And she was kind of miffed because, she remembers these things so well. But, I was saying, pasensya na lang, I really can't remember.
I was
But,
going to say thank you, Dr. Buenaventura, for emphasizing that I have more life experiences rather than mental deterioration at this point in my life.
good for you.
Okay, so are there any questions from our students who obviously are not of this age group, but it can help you explain with the elderly members of your family
Yes.
why they act like that. Maybe, it will give you a better understanding of them. It would make for better family relationships, I guess.
Mm-mm. Tina, there's a question that was sent directly to me. How do decreased birth rates increase the proportion of the elderly? There's actually a graph that I didn't include this graph because but there's in society, in terms of the population, there are two dependent groups kasi, yung 15 and below and then yung 60 and above. So from 16 to 60, yan yung earning group. So they actually support the 60 and above and the 15 and below. In what we're seeing is that the 15 and below age group also contracting by 1% every year. So pag lumiliit ang yung youth, lumalaki yung proportion ng elderly kasi humahaba ang lifespan eh. In fact, our median age is growing by 1 year every 5 years. So 5 years ago, our median age group is 22. Now our median age is 23. Okay, so we're a growing old population, though technically still young, but we are growing old. Okay, so that's what I meant by how decreased birth rates will increase the proportion of the elderly. The 15-year-old and below, from 0 to 15 group is contracting, lumiliit sila by about 1% every 5 years. So every time the census is taken.
It's because they say millennials and Gen Z don't want to get married right away. They want to postpone having kids. So kumukonti nga yung population of kids ngayon.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, even the census shows that right now average family size is 2 to 3 children per family. Yung panahon namin 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 mga kanon, di ba? Basketball team at the very least, tas pati yung bench warmers, ganon. So that's part of that. And again because there's a change in the concept of what constitutes. I'm sure they all know this already if they've discussed this sa family life cycle, di ba? Yung topic na yun eh. Because that discusses the changes in the family structure as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there are the pressures that my parents used to have. Like my mom was saying, if you turn 20 in her day and you weren't married yet, you're headed towards, it's the 1950s. So
yes.
So, are there any more questions? It's 5 o'clock. If you don't mind, I will just write Dr. Buenaventura's email address for those who are quite shy with their queries. They can address it to him. I put Dr. Buenaventura in a spot. Yes, Dr. Buenaventura, I'm gonna publish your email on Canvas for our students who have additional queries. Thank you again very much, Dr. Buenaventura, for sharing your expertise, and I mean expertise on this topic. And to our students, we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.
Bye everyone. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you po.
Thank you po.
good morning.